Wednesday. So today we're going to talk about Defender for cloud security. My name is Mark Jacquard, and I am an architect, security architect with Talon. And my partner in crime is here, Tom Jesluski. And if you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat. And we'll be talking all sorts of different cool stuff today. So I want to welcome all of you. Hopefully you find this interesting and you maybe get some little tidbits, nuggets to take back. So without further ado, let's talk about cloud security. So most of us know, being in this industry, there are all sorts of security challenges that we all face day in, day out. And they only get worse as the weeks, months, years go by, right? So one of the big challenges about security is actually visibility into security and compliance. So really what that means is we don't always see everything, right? We have to understand, how do we view all of those events, right? A big thing around that is control. Okay, so we talk about the different controls that we put in place, one of them being policies, different types of products, all of those different things. Without security controls in place, 68% of breaches take months or longer to discover. So what is that really telling me? Okay, so let's talk about a control where we actually send log data somewhere, let's say a SIM, okay? Now, that control allows me to see those log entries and then correlate those log entries, let's say, in our SIM. Without that control in place, meaning I'm not sending the logs to a central place where I can see what's going on, I don't have visibility. This actually happened at a customer of mine before I came to Talon, where they had a third-party server managed by a vendor, and they had no access to that server, and it was an antivirus server. That antivirus server picked up an event, a breach, and nobody knew about it until that bad actor did lateral movement and then got picked up by something else where the SIM saw it. Okay, so it's all about that time to respond. It took over 3 months in this case for us to actually see there was a bad actor on the network, because they stayed wherever we couldn't see them for a while. Okay, in 2019, we saw a 95% increase in the cost of an average breach. The cost was $5.16 million. That's according to Ponemon Institute. Now, obviously, that's going to be based on the size of an organization, right? This is just the average cost. But I don't know about you. I don't have $5 million to waste on a breach, right? Most companies don't, but they end up spending that money anyway. Now, another challenge, which I was alluding to before, is the increase in the number and sophistication of attacks. Now, I kind of laugh recently about this term sophistication, because if you actually follow the news lately, a lot of these bad actors have actually started using one of the oldest exploit tools as ransomware, and that is distributed denial of service attacks. They're actually using DDoS attacks and putting messages in the packets that say, hey, pay us and we'll quit. That's not sophisticated. That's been around forever. I'm not taking away anything about stuff that they do with ransomware and other things, because I've looked at a lot of the code. And yes, it's very sophisticated. They're smart people. It's too bad they're on the wrong side, right? But in 2019, there were 12 billion cloud activities inspected, monitored, and controlled by Microsoft. Obviously, a proven set of products, right? Now, one of the things I like to talk about is zero trust. So why are we having a zero trust conversation? Okay, so we all know that moving to the cloud over the last 5-10 years, right, has been a big deal. We all know that IT security can be very complex and it can be very expensive because we have many devices, users, connections, all of that, right? Well, we look at zero trust because we all know that identity really has become that new border now, right? Especially with cloud computing. In the old days, so to speak, we had what we called trusted network. So everybody sits in the office, they're behind a firewall and all sorts of traditional security devices. And as time went on, we got all sorts of new, improved, advanced, whatever you want to call them, products, devices to protect the network, right? In this trusted network scenario, most of the attacks were network based. They were network centric. They were looking at IP addresses, protocols, ports, all of those different things, but traditionally network based. It seemed seemingly economical and simple to secure the network, right? We started implementing what's called Lair Defenses or defense in depth. We layered all of these types of products to protect that network. Now, as time went on, and I know because I've done this, I worked at one of the largest financial corporations in America. And a third of the gross national product went through this company every day. We got to the point where we were actually buying 3 different products that did the exact same thing. That's not cheap. And the methodology behind that was, well, if they get through one, they probably won't get through the other. And we always accepted a lower risk security within the network, right? Because it's all these bad guys out here trying to get in. And what we all learned was no matter what we did, people still got in. It was a matter of how long did it take us to detect them? What was the impact of the breach? What were the failures of our policies, our controls, and everything that we needed to improve on, right? And then we all got this, let's all move to the cloud, okay? Things started increasingly leaving the network. COVID-19 really brought this out. There were many companies out there who were not ready for a mobile workforce. So they had to slam in architecture that would allow their people to work remote. Bring your own device, mobile, software as a service, all of these things, right? Identity really became the new border with the cloud infrastructure. So how do we secure that? Most technology doesn't focus or didn't focus on identity controls, right? That's all about zero trust. How do we secure a cloud based on a zero trust model? Identity being one of the biggest target areas, one of the largest attack surfaces, right? We all know over the last 5 to 10 years, phishing emails have gone up by at least 500%, right? People want your identity. Why? Because it gives them access, right? They want your device because that device is authenticated. That device has an identity. I worked for a long time doing Department of Defense work, and I remember when the Department of Defense said they would never do cloud computing. Well, we all know that changed. They do cloud computing. The Department of the Army, all of that, all the military branches have cloud. How important that identity really is, really hit home with me when they started connecting paratroopers to the cloud. So when a paratrooper jumps out of a plane, they're connected to the cloud. So how important is that identity at that point, right? It's hugely important to understand we have to have a modern way of securing today's architectures. Defense in depth, layered security, I'm not saying is invalid. It's still a valid methodology. But in a cloud environment, that isn't so easy to do, and it's quite expensive. So we shift our methodology to something more modern, right? We all know security teams are just often overwhelmed. How do I protect this? How do I configure it? Where are those misconfigurations? All of those things. What do I put in place to protect? How do I protect? What are the largest attack surfaces? And these are all things that zero trust really helps us identify. A zero trust strategy really will increase your security assurances for your business assets, your data, applications, identity. It's everywhere. It will include public and untrusted networks. It's going to lead to, one, a better user experience because it's a policy-driven architecture. It's going to lead to a better productivity environment. We're going to explicitly validate trust on access requests. So what does that mean? It means I no longer have to play a predictive game of where is Mark coming from this week. I don't have to know the ports, the IPs, everything that Mark is going to access because access will get validated at access time. So if I need access to a database server and that access has been set up, it will validate me at access time and grant me the access. If I don't have access, it's going to say, sorry, bye. It dynamically addresses insufficient trust, right? It leads to a more modern SecOps because we're going to have pervasive detection and response. We're going to have deep asset visibility inside and outside the firewall, right? We have those controls in place. It's going to lead to rapid remediation with automation and integrated workflows. We could set up SOAR, security, orchestration, automated response, right? Mark doesn't validate the way he's supposed to. So therefore, Mark fails those authentication mechanisms. What do? Okay, so we have automation put in place that says lock his account. Send email, notify people, right? That's all happening automatically. Now, when we look at operational technology and data center, we can now monitor and segment assets based by business risk. What are the risks, right? How much will it cost if this server is breached or this asset is breached? Based on that risk, we can put different controls in place. It's going to help me protect those workloads, those apps, APIs, device security, right? Now, we also look at operational technology. So if we think about our operational technology, things like routers, switches, all of those types of things, Most people don't even think about that, but that technology is 50 to 100 years old. You may have newer devices, and there may have been modernized things put in place, but those routers and switches still do the exact same thing they did 50 years ago. They're still network centric. They're still relying on protocol, IP, all of those things. This is a way, zero trust is a way to actually secure the infrastructure based on modern methodologies. It increases security and it increases productivity of the environment. Now, looking at building a zero trust foundation. Zero trust is a security architecture model that institutes a deny until verified approach for access to resources both inside and outside the network. This approach actually addresses the challenges associated with that shifting security perimeter in a cloud-centric and mobile workforce era, right? The core principle of zero trust is maintaining strict access control, right? Now, it's a concept that's really critical to preventing attackers from pivoting laterally and elevating access within the environment. And we'll get to an example of what people do in a kill chain model. But the implementation of zero trust framework is so important. The federal government announced on January 27th of this year that all their infrastructure must be compliant by the end of 2024. Now, I mentioned I did a lot of work in my career over the last 30 years with the Department of Defense, with government agencies, all of that. If you've ever done work in a government environment, you know that a 2-year time frame to do anything is really fast. Give you an example, I spent 4 years in the Middle East. I ordered 3 EMC squared SANS devices for a product. 4 years after I left the Middle East, they actually implemented those SANS devices. Took almost 8 years. That's a long time just to put 3 SANS devices into a network. This is the article that was published in Security Week about that. Now, zero trust is actually based on 3 guiding principles. Verify explicitly. Always authenticate and authorize based on all data points available. So remember, I was talking about defense in depth. Does it mean that I don't need a firewall to limit access to certain? No, that's a data point, okay? That's a data point I can use. Least privileged access. Limit user access with just in time and just enough access. So I have access because I request it only when I need access, and I only have just enough access. Can use things like PIM, all of those things within Azure. And always assume breach. Minimize the blast radius for breaches, right? Always assume it's been breached. We want to prevent lateral movement by segmenting access for users, network devices, app awareness, all of that. So when I think of assume breach, I'm a security person. I really like to give the example of how do I assume breach? Okay, everybody has heard the term, the only secure computer is the one that's still in the box and has never been plugged into the internet. I don't even believe that. I buy a new computer. The first thing I do is take it out of the box and reformat the hard drive. Write ones and zeros across all of it. And then I put an operating system disk in and build the OS with what I want and only the way I want it built, because I don't know the people who built that box. That's assumed breach. Like I said, it's not really paranoia if somebody's really following me. Okay? And these are the things we look at in zero trust. But we apply these principles to 6 pillars that Microsoft defines. Now, if you look up zero trust, you'll see anywhere from 3 pillars to 10 pillars. It really depends on whose article you're reading. But nobody will tell you where to start your journey. But again, it's about securing the environment based on these 3 guiding principles that have nothing to do with, at least totally, with securing ports, IP addresses. That's just part of it, not the whole. So when we look at zero trust, another thing that's really cool about Microsoft is they map a lot of their products to the specific pillars. Okay, so we have identity, devices, data, apps, infrastructure, network. That's what Microsoft defines as the 6 pillars of zero trust. So identity, I have Azure AD, identity protection, Defender for identity. For my devices, I have Defender for cloud, Defender for endpoint. I have Intune to manage that inventory. When I look at the data pillar, Defender for O365, for SQL, for servers, and it has a built-in vulnerability assessment tool to continuously assess the security posture of those devices that contain that data. I have Defender for app services. So my applications, I can actively defend against threats against my apps. Defender for cloud with just-in-time and just enough access. So what does this mean? Well, let's say I'm a domain admin. My partner in crime, Tom, is here, and he's a domain admin, right? We have global rights in Azure. Do I need his permission to make a change? Absolutely not. I can go in and I can make any change I want because I'm a global admin. But in this case, it's not about just controlling the access of just in time and just enough. It's also about process procedures. I should still fill out that request that says, hey, Tom, I need access to this device so that I can make this change. Because everybody should follow the same process, the same procedure. It's documented and there's a record of it, right? It's not always just about can I do it? It's about should I do it without following the process? Then you have adaptive network hardening using Azure Defender for your networks. We also have network security groups, we have firewall, we have all of those things to protect the network. But at Talon, we also include a 7th pillar. And we talk about organizational policy as well. But Defender for Cloud actually has policies that you can implement. And those policies get applied, and you can audit yourself against those policies in a dashboard. So you can see how you stack up against, let's say you apply ISO 27001. You can see how you stack up against ISO, where you're deficient, and what you need to do to become compliant with ISO. Organizational policies help as well, because policy without enforcement is just a suggestion. You have to enforce policy in order for it to be effective. Remember, effective control. We have to have controls. And then finally, I was talking about SIEM. Well, Microsoft has their own SIEM. It's called Sentinel. This is where I could send all of these logs in a single ecosystem to Sentinel. And I could write all sorts of cool correlation rules and all of that to truly have a single pane of glass to look at all of those threats in real time. It's really actually near real time because it takes time for logs to actually propagate and go where they need to go. Each one of these products, in essence, is kind of its own panel, but not totally a single pane of glass. Okay? We have multiple panes of glass looking at the security, but in a single ecosystem, it's a very limited how many panes of glass do I have to go look at. Now, one of the things I always like to point out, and this applies to just about everything we do as IT professionals, is a maturity model. So when it comes to something like zero trust, we have to decide where we're going to start. Now, I mentioned identity is a great place to start. But if you read the articles, none of them will tell you that's specifically where you have to start based on your needs, your business, your methodology. Okay? I say start at identity and devices only because those are the two largest attack surfaces in almost every infrastructure. But if I told you today that I wanted you to go secure the environment based on a zero trust framework, how long would it take you to get from day one to end state? Now, mind you, it's not going to be totally an end state because we all know the one thing we can count on in IT is change. It'll be a near end state. It's a journey, not a destination. But if I told you in your environment that you had to get this done, how long would it take you to get from day one to near end state? 12 months, 18, 2 years, 3 years? Well, most of us have 10 other jobs. That's just a number. So with 10 other jobs, we always know there's going to be a fire somewhere and I'm going to get called away and I'm going to have to go do a bunch of other stuff and then come back to this and figure out where I was. But if my boss told me, Mark, I want you to get this done ASAP, and I'm going to give all the rest of your job duties to Tom. Now, Tom's going to be overworked, but how long would it take me if this is the only thing that I have to focus on? 6 months? Maybe a year? Because I have to work with other people to get things done because, I don't control certain things. I don't control the apps and I don't understand all the apps. So I need input from all my stakeholders. But you see, the big point of this is understand that life happens. Your job happens. Don't get frustrated and quit. That's the real point here. It's gonna take time. Everything worth doing takes time. We've all implemented products, all of that, and it takes time. We have to go back, tune things, do things, right? Just don't get frustrated and quit. Now, looking at Azure. Azure is actually the only cloud platform built by a security vendor. I know a lot of people who would say, well, Microsoft's not a security vendor. I would probably be guilty of that myself. I spent the majority of my career as an X person, Linux, Unix, all of that. But they truly are a security vendor. And they spend over 10 billion or earn over 10 billion in security revenue every year. More than 400,000 customers. 90 of the top Fortune 100 customers actually use Microsoft security solutions. They employ over 3,700 security experts, and I know some of those people, and they are security experts. I've worked with them. And they spend over $1 billion annually on security. Okay, that doesn't sound like a big deal, right? But they, August of 2021, in front of the US government, committed to spending over $20 billion in 5 years to better serve the security community by building tools for security. That's a huge investment. I think Google, by comparison, committed $150 million. That's a far cry from $20 billion. Okay. In 2020, there were 6 billion malware threats blocked by Microsoft Defender products. Now, the big thing I point out, and I like to point out, is what differentiates a true security company, and it's right here. True security companies have a threat research department comprised of many different types of people, okay? Microsoft takes in 8 trillion signals every 24 hours. Now, what's a signal? They're looking at the internet and they're looking for malware, indicators of compromise, suspicious, malicious websites, all of that. And they're taking all of those signals, and people are actually reverse engineering malware, looking and researching these IP addresses, websites, all of that, and saying, yes, this is a threat. No, this is not a threat. And they're creating a threat feed for their products that they can automatically update things like Defender to say, look for this new thing. It's bad. Okay. This is truly only a security vendor type thing. Okay. So yes, they are a security tool. They are a security vendor, and they do a great job. Now, I told you I'd come back to this, understanding why this is so important, looking at a kill chain model. Looking at what bad actors do is really important because it helps us identify where I need to plug holes, if there's somebody on the network, right? This comes down to things like the Lockheed kill chain methodology, the MITRE matrix. If you've ever been an analyst, you're familiar with the pyramid of pain, right? So what do bad actors do? The first thing they're going to do is look for exposure. Insecurely configured applications, right? Is a port open that shouldn't be? Is the level of access to that application higher than it should be? They're going to look for vulnerabilities. Did you patch this yet? Okay, so you patched it, but did you do a reboot? Because it's not fully patched if you didn't do a reboot, and they're going to look to exploit that to gain access. Infected admin, accounts, devices, those types of things. Once they find the exposure, they want to exploit it. And they're going to use it to access things, right? Virtual machines, web apps. How can they use those things? Where are they present? They're going to look for credentials. That's what everybody wants. They want something. That's the easy way in. Brute force attacks. So, using rainbow tables, password crackers like Loftcrack and all of that to try and brute force a username and password. This is why Linux many years ago said that you should use key authentication, public-private key, rather than username and password. It's harder to brute force a key pair than it is a username and password. They're looking at the Internet of Things. I don't know, it was probably November of last year that I read this whole article about a banking app that had been exploited by bad actors, and they now have control over all of those phones with that app. Again, where are the holes that will allow them to access the network? Then what are they going to do with that? They're going to look to do lateral movement. So let's say they get a normal user's ID. They have no privileges other than to do their work. So what are they looking to do? Well, lateral movement. They want to move laterally through the network. And they want to try to escalate their privileges as they go. So they're going to be looking at web apps, databases, other virtual machines, right? And they're going to be looking at how to sniff things that have happened in the network on that system to try and expose credentials that have more privileges. And then what's the end game? That's what it's really all about. What is the end game? What is this bad actor? What do they really want? Do they want to destroy all your data because they just don't like you? Or do they want to exfiltrate that data, blackmail you, or sell it on the dark web, or whatever it is, so they can make money? Now, if you follow the geopolitical news landscape, this data loss is happening in the Eastern Bloc of the world. There's ransomware over there that's targeted systems that say, pay us and we'll give you the key. They give them the key after they pay, and the minute they reboot their box, it wipes all the hard drive. They had no intention of releasing the data. Now, if you don't think that'll find its way across the world, the rest of the world, that's probably not going to be reality. Those types of attacks will probably find their way through the rest of the world, not just the Eastern Bloc. But again, a big thing about this is mandatory reporting laws, especially if you're a publicly traded company. Do you really want to make the front page of the news, right? So it's all about thinking that methodology, worst case scenario. How do we detect and defend against this? And that's what we all want to do. And that's what like the MITRE matrix is about. What type of an attack is it? How have they progressed, right? All of that. And it helps us understand what bad actors are doing. Now, with Defender for Cloud, it helps you strengthen your security posture. You're going to see a secure score. You're going to see policy and how well you're compliant to those policies. It's going to help you improve automation. But then it's about protecting that workload, right? Protect your hybrid. You don't have to be in Azure in order to use Defender for Cloud. There is a product called Azure Arc. It's an agent that you can actually deploy in other cloud or on your on-prem systems to make it look like it exists in Azure. What's the benefit of that? Well, if we're policy-driven people, I can now enforce my policy against every device, no matter where it lives, whether it be Google, Amazon, Azure, or on-prem. because I can apply the same policy. I can use Defender for Cloud for all of those workloads, for databases, no matter where they exist, for the IoT devices. Defender for Cloud, if we look in this big red outline, we can see exactly where Defender for Cloud really plays. Remember, I mentioned they have a threat intel department, right? 8 trillion signals every 24 hours. And everything they find that's bad becomes a threat feed, and it gets fed to Defender for Cloud. So that Defender for Cloud is instantly aware of those new threats and how to defend against them and how to detect it and all of that. I mentioned policy, Azure policy, so that I can say, how do I stack up against the things that the company says that we need to be compliant with? That policy is also in Defender for Cloud. The ASC default policy, benchmark policy, gets applied to every subscription by default. It looks at storage, VMs, all of those things, containers, apps, all of that, if I turn it on. And an important distinction is, in today's world, if you're using Key Vault, you're using storage accounts, and we all, if we're in Azure, have the resource manager, only Defender for Cloud is capable of actively defending against threats on those 3 resources in Azure. Other products have agents that monitor and send logs. Well, sending logs doesn't prevent the threat. But in the dashboard, I can also see how my firewalls are, whether it's an Azure firewall or a partner. Has to be a partner for you to see that dashboard. We have network security groups. Again, remember, it's about defending against those threats. We can limit access, right? Just like a firewall with a network security group. But as I mentioned with Azure Arc, I can extend that threat protection to my on-prem network. I can extend this policy to my on-prem network by deploying Azure Arc. I could do it in Google. I can do it in AWS. Doesn't matter where it exists. I can make it look like it exists in the cloud. And I can manage it from there. Now, looking at Defender for Cloud, it is a dashboard-driven tool. It is a tool to help you improve security posture and gives you threat protection so that you can see those threats. You can see how you stack up. You can see if they were remediated. It's going to strengthen your posture of those cloud resources or integrated, hybrid, other cloud, all of that based on the plans and the products you choose. Defender for Cloud provides the tools needed to harden your resources, track your security posture, protect against threats, and streamline that security management process. Defender for Cloud actually fills 3 vital needs. It's going to continuously assess your posture, identify and track vulnerabilities. Has a Qualys scanner built into it, so it continuously scans to say, hey, you didn't apply this patch. Hey, this is a misconfiguration. You should not allow people to log into the Linux box with root. It helps you harden them, secure those services. You're going to have this benchmark policy by default. It helps you defend and detect threats because, let's face it, it's a Defender product, right? So it's getting all those threat feeds. It knows about all that malware, and it's going to help you protect against threats on your resources, workloads, and services. Now, looking at a security requirement, continuously assess, right? Continuous assessment of your posture. Understand your security. Secure score is a score at a single glance that will tell you how you stack up. The higher the score, the better. It's the lower the risk identified if your score is high. Now, that score doesn't take into consideration anything you're mitigating with a third-party product, but it will show you anything that's managed, what isn't there. You could create exemptions, exceptions, right? It's going to help you harden all the connected resources and services. It's going to give you security recommendations, customized and prioritized hardening tasks for you to improve your posture. You can implement a recommendation by following detailed steps, or in many cases, you're going to have this little lightning bolt quick fix option to where all you have to do is press that button and say, fix it for me. Now, I would never do that without reading what it's going to do and talking to the owners of those things, apps, devices, whatever, to see how it will affect their product. But I could do that. I don't have to know. I could just say, fix it, and it will fix it for me if that lightning bolt is available. Again, defend, detect, and resolve threats to those resources and services. We're going to get security alerts. With enhanced security features enabled, Defender for Cloud detects threats for your workloads, your resources. These alerts actually appear in the portal in Defender for Cloud. So you can send emails to relevant people within your organization. You could send the alerts to a SIM, a SOAR, all of those types of things you could automate to make sure somebody sees it. And you could actually write logic apps to make sure it gets automatically resolved. Okay? SOAR, Security Orchestration Automated Response, right? All of those things can be done from a dashboard. And here's an example of a dashboard. You can see in this environment, it tells me how many subscriptions I have. I have 73 subscriptions. I have 4 AWS accounts, 4 Google projects. I have 5,984 assessed resources, 209 active recommendations, and 7,336 security alerts. All in a single glance, a single pane of glass. I can now see my security score. So, unhealthy resources, right? We said we have 5,984 resources. 4,100 are not healthy, which means I need to dive into this, drill into it, and see what's not healthy. I can see my workload protection. So I can see the coverage here. 98% full protection enabled on 11 resource plans. All my high, medium, and low alerts. Regulatory compliance. How do I stack up against CMMC, NIST, and ISO? I can see insights, most relevant recommendations by resources, right? My firewall manager, I see the status of all my firewalls if they are Microsoft firewall or a partner firewall. Otherwise, this will be empty. I can see my inventory. Unmonitored VMs. I have 134 unmonitored VMs. Remember, I have 4,100 plus unhealthy 1,400 healthy, and 448 not applicable. I get information protection. This utilizes a tool called Purview, currently in preview. And yes, you do have to pay for it, but it gives you insights into your resources of things that you might want to look at from all sorts of different perspectives, right? I get new security alerts, controls, right? Remediate vulnerabilities, remediate security, enable multi-factor authentication, all of this in a single pane of glass. Now, security posture management with your secure score. So you gain instant insight into the state of your cloud workloads, right? It's going to show you, hey, if you do this, you're going to increase your score by X%, right? It's looking at everything, access, compute resources, network, apps, all of that. It's going to help you address vulnerabilities with prioritized recommendations. Now, if you've been in Defender for Cloud, let's say you got a Linux box, you're going to see all sorts of configuration recommendations about your Linux. Now, it's not going to automatically remediate those for you. You could write a logic app, but for the most part, you're going to have to go out and look at those recommendations. Like I mentioned, no root access. So you would have to go to the VM, turn off root access, making sure that users own their home directory, those types of things. It's going to help you improve that secure score with those recommendations. And it's going to happen within minutes, right? It can take up to 24 hours, but it's looking at that score. It's assessing all of these things that you do, haven't done, scanning all of these, and it's going to give you the ability to speed up your regulatory compliance because it's going to show you how you stack up against those policies you've applied, and it's going to give you granular control. Now, is this going to fluctuate? Absolutely. Unless your environment is totally static, nothing ever changes, that score is going to fluctuate based on things going in and out, configuration changes, all of that. But the idea is to keep that score as high as possible. So looking at secure score, right? Drilling into it, we can see by clicking on this pane, I can now go in and look at what my secure score is. You see here, 47%. I've got approximately 27 of 58 points. How am I doing? What subscriptions I'm looking at? I have 3 here. How are they stacking up? The highest one being this bottom one. I can see the secure score for each individual subscription. And I can click and view the recommendations, right? So that I can see what I need to do to improve that score. So I'm in recommendations and you can see remediate vulnerabilities. Oh, and it's saying I'm going to get 10 points. I've got 59 or 56 of 59 unhealthy, but this could be deceiving. What if these are all patches and I just haven't hit my reboot cycle? I've got to wait until, Saturday morning to reboot the devices. This is one of those areas, this might be a false positive because until the boxes reboot, I don't know if that patch is applied properly. But enable encryption at rest. So 80 of 90 resources need to have encryption turned on. I could open this up and see exactly what it's telling me. And I can go through all of these recommendations. The nice thing is I didn't have to go out and discover this on my own. Defender for Cloud did it for me. Compliance. No matter what, we are all under some compliance standard, whether it be regulatory, whether it be something my boss or CISO wants implemented, we're working under a framework, whatever it might be. I can apply those policies here. And I can see how I stack up. Utilizing Azure Arc, I can actually apply this policy to Google, AWS, and my on-prem. So now I have a consistent policy enforcement mechanism across 3 other environments, right? And I didn't have to buy another product for Google, another one for AWS, and one for on-prem to get compliant with these policies. Again, every subscription gets the security benchmark by default. It is fully aligned with the Secure Score. The other thing about that is it's a policy that's designed for security best practices, of Azure. It's basically loosely based on NIST 853. And then it has Microsoft sprinkles of Azure security best practices put into it. It is not full-blown NIST, but it's a great starting point to help you secure the environment based on security best practices. But it does support common industry standards, things like PCI, CMMC, ISO, NIST. You could apply the full-blown NIST policy, but I can see how I stack up against all of these. What are the things I need to work on? Based on security benchmark policy, it's telling me under identity management, remember, identity is the new border, managed identity should be used in your web app. So I could go switch this to a managed identity rather than a system generated one. I could do that across all these policies. Now, when it comes to policy, I'm really a firm believer on one at a time, because what you will notice is many of these transcend all policies. So if I fix it in one, it's fixed in everything else, and I won't be chasing my tail thinking, oh my God, I've got to fix this and blah, 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 because I haven't done anything yet. I'm just looking and I see all of these things I'm not compliant with. If I fix it here in the Azure Security Benchmark, if it exists in any one of these other ones, it will go away automatically because I already fixed it. One at a time, layer them on top of each other. Now, as I mentioned before, there are plenty of standards. Many of these are free. Some you have to pay for. But by default, every subscription gets this Azure Security Benchmark policy. It's a great starting point because it's Azure specific, and it will help you come into compliance with best practices of securing Azure. But again, you could put the full-blown NIST, you could put CMMC and all sorts of other policies on your environment so that you can track how you stack up and what you need to fix in order to be compliant. It's a great place to show auditors. If you get audited, whether it's internally or externally, you can show them how compliant you are with the policies according to Azure. Now, one of the things is around passwords. Password compliance, unfortunately, regulation hasn't kept up with methodology. In recent years, there have been studies done about changing your password. Changing your password every 60, 90, 120 days, right? Everybody's familiar with that. The new standard is don't change your password, because studies have been done that prove by changing your password on a set schedule, it actually increases the chance that your password will be breached. But many of these regulations say you have to change it on a set schedule. So regulation hasn't kept up with the industry, okay? Just something to note while you're doing policy. Now, again, I mentioned the firewall manager. If you have Azure firewalls, or if you have some of the partner firewalls that are supported, you're going to see how your firewalls look. And I can drill into it and it shows me. Virtual hub security coverage, protected by partner firewall, protected by Azure, no Azure firewall deployed. Now, this could be a partner firewall that isn't recognized. In other words, maybe it's a Palo Alto and you're not going to see Palos, okay? Virtual network security coverage, all your VNets, DOS coverage. Are you protected by DOS, the one that Microsoft provides, which protects the fabric, or are you protected by the standard plan, which you have to pay for, which protects your environment specifically? Now, if you haven't kept up on the news, I already mentioned the fact about how ransomware bad actors are actually using DDoS as ransomware. But the other thing to that is about 2 months ago, Microsoft's DDoS product prevented the largest DDoS attack in history, 3.2 terabit. Now, we do security assessments and we have the security discussions with many different customers. And we recently had one that said, hey, yeah, but we're deploying these latest and greatest advanced firewalls, and what's their throughput? Well, they do like 80 gigabit. 80 gigabit is a far cry from 3.2 terabit, okay? And as you enable features, throughput gets less if it's a UTM device, Unified Threat Management. So just think about this. If you are a fairly established and larger Azure environment, the standard DDoS protection is really a good option. It's right now, I think, $2,944 a month. But it's already proven technology and it's proven its benefit. Now, improve visibility across the entire estate. Again, I mentioned single pane of glass. Now, this is a pane of glass in Azure. There are many panes of glass in Azure. But when it comes to security, this is one of those panes of glass that's really valuable because I've got secure score, workload protections. I can see my alerts, my inventory, who's healthy, my regulatory compliance, all of that in a single pane of glass. And again, I can show people how we're doing. Most importantly, we all have been, usually most of us anyway, have been down the road of their boss comes up and says, show me what that thingy is doing for us, right? This is a valuable tool to show that. Hey, look, we started out at 4,100 resources being unhealthy. We're now down to 101 being unhealthy. So I've remediated 4,000 devices. Now they're all healthy, right? I can document step by step what I have done based on this tool to my upper management, that what I told them to buy is actually working, right? Again, I can show we've improved compliance. I can show auditors that we are 99% of the way to being compliant across the whole organization in Azure and other workplaces, right? On-prem, Google, Amazon, by using Azure Arc. Valuable tool because I can document everything I've done along the way. Defender for Cloud periodically analyzes the security state roughly every hour of your Azure resources to identify potential security vulnerabilities. It provides recommendations that we were just talking about. Show me what's wrong and tell me how to fix it. They will appear in the inventory if they have any outstanding recommendations. We'll get the total resources, unhealthy, unmonitored, and unregistered subscriptions. So you have a subscription, but you haven't registered it yet. Why isn't it registered? Do I need to register it? Right? In a single pane of glass. You can see I can filter. I can go in and I can filter everything. I can see all of my inventory. Show me every device. 1,904 total resources, 318 unhealthy. And I could filter for only unhealthy. I have all these filtering options up here. I can get very granular on my filtering to know exactly what I want to focus on at any given moment in time. This is just a quick demonstration of a filter. We're looking at an environment filter. Identify machines tagged with environment production, right? So show me the monitoring agent, right? Show me where it doesn't have the monitoring agent installed. That's bad. I want to monitor it. Show me a tag. It has a specific tag, right? Again, I can get very granular and only show the resources that I'm interested in investigating currently. And again, information protection with Purview. Again, Purview is an add-on product, but I can see all of the different things about data discovery, activity logs, but you can see here, I can use Purview to come in and show me confidential, highly confidential, who's violating GDPR, all of that, credit card numbers, driver's licenses, Belgian, what is it you need to look for? And Purview can help get you there in that single pane of glass. Now, I mentioned quick fix options. There used to be that old commercial about an easy button. Don't remember who the retailer was, but think of this as your easy button. With that lightning bolt, I can say, go fix it for me. I don't need to know what it's going to do. I don't need to know how it's going to do what it's going to do. All I know is Defender for Cloud tells me it needs to be remediated. Now, as I mentioned, I would never, ever click this button unless I understood exactly what it was going to do. And one of my favorite phrases, nothing happens in a vacuum. I have to talk to people. There might be a reason that this says not to do it. I might have a server that if I deploy whatever it's telling me I need to do, it's going to break the server. How do I know that? I didn't build the server. I didn't deploy the server. Who knows that? The person who built and deployed the server. So I go up and say, hey, Tom, it's telling me that you need, oh, don't do that, Mark. That whole server will come down. Okay, got it. So I don't remediate it. I create an exemption to the policy. It says it doesn't need that. Right? Because I need to understand that. Don't blindly follow the recommendation. You have to understand its impact. But you can see here, all these things here. Management ports should be protected with just-in-time. Azure Defender for SQL should be deployed. What if I have a third-party antivirus product? This doesn't apply, right? I already have AV on there. I don't need to do that. We have to create an exemption to that policy. These are things we have to understand about our own environment. But you can see, if I decide to do it, I click that lightning bolt. It asks me, where do you want to apply the fix? And I select the 3 systems I want fixed. And then I say, remediate it. Remediate those 3 resources for me. Boom, done. Make sure it works. But again, boom, done. And I didn't have to go to every machine. I didn't have to individually log in and fix it. Again, we were talking about multi-cloud support using Arc. You have Arc for servers, Arc for Kubernetes, and Arc for data services, right? So I can deploy this Azure Arc to extend Azure's management to the physical servers anywhere they exist, on-prem, multiple cloud. I can do this for Kubernetes containers across all environments. Azure data services across all environments, right? So I get that consistent enforcement and I get visibility without leaving Azure. I can see it all, right? I could create groups, AWS Azure Arc, Google Azure Arc, on-prem Azure Arc. I'll get secure score for them. I'll get the ability to do asset management, regulatory compliance, which is important. I can enforce my policy once I deploy Azure Arc to all those environments. I deploy Defender for cloud. I'll get my threat detection and I'll get my VA scanner. I'll get automation at scale. I'll be able to integrate them with SIEM, see all the logs. I'll be able to export all that information without having to log into these other places to get it. That single pane of glass. Again, you can see it's going to show me Azure subscriptions and all of the stuff in the other clouds. This is all giving me the ability to manage from a central location rather than popping across multiple environments to get the same information. What's really cool? Everything's integrated. It's all a single ecosystem. So let's say your company's been talking about deploying a SIEM. Okay, there's a number of choices out there. There's all sorts of different SIEMs on the market. Sentinel is Microsoft SIEM, been around about 4 years. But all of these Microsoft products from their XDR solution, Defender, natively integrate. A couple of clicks of the mouse, I have everything going to my SIEM. I don't have to set up a whole bunch of stuff and figure out how to do log ingestion, forwarding, all of that. Nope, it's all going to come in. 1 or 2 clicks of the mouse. Now, I can also bring in third party. Yes, I will have to configure, a connector device. I will have to configure some other things depending on what the connector is. But the number of third-party and partner devices they support grows daily. I will tell you, because I have been asked this several times, SIEM has been around a long time. I worked for the company that actually invented SIEM. Many SIEM companies, vendors, at a certain point, really kind of quit developing their product. Microsoft Sentinel is a baby, but the big benefit to that is Microsoft is dumping millions of dollars into development. And sometimes you see new stuff daily and you pop into your Sentinel SIEM and go, oh, wow, what's that? That's new. It just appeared. Gives me another tool to do something really cool. They automate a lot of things. Many of the things that would require one of the largest customers requesting a change in the other SIMs are actually being updated sometimes on a daily basis, but it's all natively integrated. And that's what's cool about having a single ecosystem. I remember the days of, hey, we're going to buy this firewall, we're going to buy this from this different vendor, this from a different vendor, because we don't want to. Those days are gone. Single ecosystem is really a great way to go. MFA, all integrated into Azure. Azure Active Directory. Conditional access policies are all there for your free use. Identity protection, if you have a P2 license, you have almost every company uses 365. That's all integrated. All of that natively integrates into their SIM solution. That final pane of glass where everything goes. It is comprehensive threat protection. Any server, any VM, no matter where it exists, managed instances, Azure storage, SQL, Postgres, MySQL, Maria, the Internet of Things, Key Vault, Layer 1 protection, Resource Manager, DNS, it's all there under Defender for Cloud. All natively integrates. And as I mentioned before, if you want active threat protection for Resource Manager, Key Vault, and your storage accounts, right? This is where all your data is in a storage account. This is the keys to the kingdom. All your keys stored in a Key Vault. If a bad actor gets access to your Key Vault, they own you. And your Resource Manager, where you deploy all your templates, all of the blueprints, all of those things, nothing actively protects these other than Defender for Cloud. Others get logs, but by then it's too late. So if a log detected that your Key Vault was exploited, by the time it makes it back to whatever is monitoring and whomever is looking at the console, it's too late. They already have all the keys if they exploited it. Defender for Cloud can actually actively prevent unauthorized access, prevent threats, all of that to that Key Vault. Again, workload protections, right? Looking at your workloads, looking at the threats, what's coming in. Here you can see vulnerability assessment, 147 unprotected, 15 unprotected just-in-times, adaptive application control, 48 unprotected, container image scanning, unprotected, 8. Adaptive network hardening. You're going to see most prevalent security alerts. You're going to see most attacked resources. So why are these two resources 100% higher than this? The closest one, 2,000 versus 223. I'm going to see all my servers, my containers, registries, all of that. What needs to be fixed? What's healthy? What are the levels of alerts I'm seeing? We can see there are 4.6 thousand high alerts, security alerts. I get prioritized. I get insights into those threats. It's actively monitoring all my workloads for me. Huge benefit. Again, Defender for servers, Linux or Windows, no matter where they exist. I can detect anti-malware. I can do behavioral analysis. I can look at lateral movement, malicious code, data exfiltration. And I can block it anywhere with adaptive application controls, limiting ports, all of that. And it's going to give me the recommendations before this happens. So I can say, hey, look, it told me about that. I fixed it. As part of Defenders, you've got that vulnerability assessment tool for Linux and Windows to scan those VMs. Tell me what I need to fix. Again, a lot of these, especially for like Linux, are not going to give you a quick fix option. But I just watched a video that was released November of last year that says they're working on automating this. So when you see it, they're working on all of the logic apps and scripts that are going to need to be deployed in order to automate fixing these security recommendations. That's awesome. Then I don't have to write it myself, because that could be months of development work in many different scripts and logic apps. But they are working on automating that for you. SQL, anywhere, everywhere it exists, whether it's in on-prem, whether it's in Azure, Defender for SQL will prevent those hybrid attacks, those threats targeting SQL specifically. Storage, one of the ones that only Defender for Cloud can actively prevent. This is where all my files are, all my information, and I want to actively prevent them from doing that. And I can do that with Defender for Cloud. Container registries, it's seamless. It's going to scan those images. It's going to put them in basically a sandbox and scan them as a whole, not each individual part. So it's going to look at it. What is it? Hey, did you download a bad container? It's actually infected. Don't deploy it. That's what it's going to tell me. It's going to actively scan all of that so that you know whether or not it's reliable and not infected. Defender for clusters. Runtime threat detection. So it's going to look at those audits and it's going to detect any threats when it runs and shut it down. Admission control, policy, again, mandate, audit, best practices for those workloads. Defend at every point in your containers. Looking at a threat matrix for Kubernetes, you can see this doesn't look really much different. So looking at initial access, cloud credentials, execution, persistence, backdoor into the container, privilege escalation through that container, defense evasion, clearing logs, listing secrets for credential access, discovery, access to the API, then lateral movement through the cloud resources. Finally, data destruction. But you can see it looks pretty similar. It's just based on what they're doing with Kubernetes. And you can see there's a whole article about it. The whole attack matrix. If you look up an attack matrix for Kubernetes, you're going to get this. And the breadth of threat protection. Any workload in Azure, on-prem, or in other cloud environments, right? But specifically, these two, Defender for Key Vault and Resource Manager, are only available with Defender for Cloud. You can use Defender for DNS, great tool, monitor all those queries. Who's querying bad domains? That might indicate that their system is infected. It's a valuable tool. Just another option. Defender for the Internet of Things, auto discovery of the assets, vulnerability management, what's vulnerable, threat detection. And again, it's natively integrated with Sentinel. So you could send it all to your SIEM. Create cool correlation rules that look for indicators of compromise based on seemingly disparate logs and make them relevant to each other. Now, this last part, Gina, one of my coworkers, is going to give you the full article for this. But this was a study done before it was renamed to Defender for Cloud, but it is still a valid study. This is all financial. Present value, return on investment, net present value, payback. You know what? I'm not an accountant. I get these numbers. Hey, what's the present value? Return on investment. You can certainly look at this. Hey, I spent $3.6 million or 1.1 million. The benefit was 3, net present value. That doesn't mean anything to me as a security person. It really doesn't. I get my bosses and people writing the check are really interested in this, but this is what I play for. 25% reduction in risk of a breach. I'm all about that. If it helps me reduce my exposure and breaches, a 25%, by 25%, I'm all about that. 50% reduction in time to mitigation. That's 50% of my time I'm not down a rabbit hole trying to figure out what happened, how it happened, and how to fix it. Hey, that's 50% of my day back. I'm all about that. I could do other cool things. 30% reduction in security policy and compliance. Hey, we all get audited. 30% less time that I have to do what my auditor tells me I need to do because I've already done it. I saw it. Policy told me I wasn't compliant. I fixed it. $216,000 annual reduction in tool spend. Hey, my bosses are about that, but so am I, because this is $216,000 I can ask them to spend on something else. As a security person, I always have cool things I want, right? That will provide value. I'm all about these. These numbers, not so much. I'm not an accountant. I understand math, all of that. But again, this is what matters to me as a security person, because this is budget I can get for a different project. Now, we, as I mentioned, do security assessments. We can do that, and in many cases, Microsoft will pay for it, right? We go through education and discovery. We'll talk about in-depth zero trust, cloud adoption framework. We'll talk about Defender for Cloud, how it can help you, and do a deeper dive. But we will go through, we'll look at your policies, DLP, Defender, Defender for 365, for cloud, for apps. We'll look at the whole Azure environment and tell you, hey, if you configured it this way, you'd be better off. This meets best practices, and we'll identify all those gaps. And as a courtesy, we'll even put together a proposal. You don't have to say, hey, you know what, we're going to do it all on our own. Awesome. But we're here for your journey. Whether you whether you want us to do it, we still want to be there for your security journey. It's a partnership. Okay. So, thank you all very much for your time. I hope you found it interesting and valuable. Again. So, happy Wednesday. I hope you have a great rest of your day.